Hi, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I hope this finds everyone doing well. Welcome to, we are doing the power of resilience, although I think it said resistance in some areas, but could be pretty much the same. Um, my name is Elena Christopoulos, and I'm the moderator of this panel. Please let me know if you can hear me through the chat or DM or anything like that. And I'm really quite uh, well, it's quite an honor to be with Amy and Nancy at the Passionistas Summit. It's also quite an honor to be with you all this morning. So thank you and happy Friday. Um, so these women are amazing that are on this panel today, and they're mostly going to talk the importance of storytelling. And when it comes to STEAM or STEM, some are scientists, some are in politics, some are just getting into politics. So you'll be able to hear their stories about what it is to be a woman in STEM or STEAM, or how to communicate STEM and STEAM. I look forward to you meeting them all. I am actually a scientist and a sustainability consultant. And I've been doing this for about 20 years, working in politics and STEM and STEAM. I've created a consulting firm and I've created over 500,000 green jobs to date. And yes, I did have to count once, so that number is accurate. I am just getting started. One of the importances I find, or importance of being a woman in STEM, STEAM, and in politics, is the ability to take up room, but also the ability to um, find new ways to get our message through. So, my quick story today is one of my clients in Texas, and that's West Texas. We had to find a way to put up wind turbines. And we weren't sure how we were going to do it. I took a team from LA. Most folks were, it was a very diverse group. Most were BIPOC women, and most had never been to Texas, especially West Texas. Um, so we first thought, what are we going to call folks that work on wind turbines in Texas? And we thought Turbine Cowboys was fitting, and the folks liked that name. So we continued on, and it was a great session. We got many folks off of oil and gas and into the renewable energy field. It was really quite lovely. And then one person said to me, excuse me, my mom would love to have a visit with you. And I've traveled enough in the world to know that if someone asks for a visit, you go. And so when I went to this visit, it was a mother, and I asked our team to come to this person's house. And they were a little suspect of what we were doing at someone's house. And I said, let's see how this goes. Let's break breads, shall we? And what happened was the woman had done some research on we are not aligned politically, and she said, my son's been struggling finding work. A lot of the folks in the community have been trouble finding work. We love that this program is called Turbine Cowboys, but why are you doing this here in West Texas? And I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. And she again said, well, why? I don't understand why you would do this, because I don't think we're aligned politically. And, the way the world is today, I just said, none of us, I said, look, I'm doing this because I think don't all we want to do is put food on the table for each other, for our families, whatever that may look like. And, I explained to her that this is something that I do and that I would love folks to get into green jobs and how important it is to be respected. So I really felt that it wasn't, I think it was a great thing her son was doing, entering the renewable energy field and being able to support his family. And um, the mother continued on and she almost started crying. And she said, we don't do enough talking these days. And I said, well, that's, I think, a lot of places in the world. But at the essence of it, aren't we all just human beings? Aren't we trying to put food on the table for our families, whatever that looks like? And I remember this story quite a lot. I mean, politics have changed. This was a few years ago, but it's the ability for myself to put myself out there, to have different people on our team, to have creating different spaces, unique spaces, and being able to, I don't know, I always have hope. And I think through trying different things, maybe that would have failed that project, maybe it would, that would have been the lesson, but it worked out quite well. And because of it, we did create 1,000 new jobs, 1,000 new folks who were mostly not politically aligned with us. We got buy-in from the community, and it was led by women. And we actually got this person's mom, part of the community. She actually got as we hired her on as part of the community outreach. She has such changed, and we are now politically aligned, but it was really just the ability to have talks. So I think it's through resilience, resistance, and just being able to um, have these conversations. Now, again, I did this because I used all the privilege I can, would not uh, have others in that space. But that is one of my many stories about working in the renewable field, working in green jobs, and the ability to continue for the power of resilience. So I hope you continue on to hear other stories. The next person up, we have Dr. Gigi Moreno.
Hello. Thank you, Elena. And thank you for your story. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here and for all your supportive and encouraging discussion in the chat. My comfort zone is really being a behind the scenes scientist. I'm most comfortable crunching numbers, talking to myself, talking to my dog. So talking to a large audience of really cool, powerful, beautiful women is a little scary for me. So I think I'm exercising the power of resilience just being here. And before I share my story with you, I need to let you know that I'm here as a private individual on my own time. My opinions are my own and not those of the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG, or our funding agencies. So, I'm an environmental economist by training, and I have been thinking a lot about resilience for a while, especially in the context of climate change. And resilience is a term that often gets thrown around a lot, and it can mean many things. We can be talking about resilience at a personal level, like I just did, as the ability to adapt and to overcome an obstacle or stressful situation. Or we can also think about resilience at a larger scale. And for this, I'd like to actually borrow a variation of the definition of resilience that we recently adopted at SCAG, at the Southern California Association of Governments. And that's that resilience is a community's capacity to anticipate and respond to changing conditions, shocks, and stressors by creating opportunities for sustainable, thriving, and an equitable future. And the story I wanted to tell you about is an example of where I saw this. Actually, we all saw this example recently. And so, as you must recall, a couple weeks ago, California was hit with the worst heat wave in our history. All 40 million of us here in the Golden State were running our air conditioners and letting the fans run all day and doing everything we could to cool off. I live at the beach, and when it gets hot in Southern California, people escape the heat to come here to cool off. During this heat wave, it was 90 degrees at the beach. There was no cooling off here. And usually, when we have hot, wet temperatures, the cooler nighttime temperatures offer us a reprieve from the daytime temperatures. But not this heat wave. We were pounded with a tsunami of heat all day and for many days. So, not surprisingly, the resulting surge in demand for electricity put record breaking stress on our electrical grid, threatening rolling blackouts throughout the state. And blackouts aren't just an inconvenience to us, that we can't charge our phones, or we can't charge our cars when we want to, or we can't run the dishwasher when it's full. So blackouts aren't just a headache for politicians. Blackouts threaten life and health, and they threaten life and health especially for our most vulnerable residents. Now, not to keep picking on Texas here, but we could have toughed it out like they did in Texas last winter and let the outages roll. Or we could have just said, kind of like Texas, and say, well, let the market take care of it. Instead, we took collective action to help everyone avoid the blackouts. And so what happened was, when the blackouts were imminent, the California electric grid operator, or known as CalISO, sent text alerts asking Californians to voluntarily reduce their electricity use during the critical hours. And it turns out we acted as a community and we avoided those blackouts. So that's what I call being resilient. We built that structure of resilience. And we were able to avoid these blackouts that could potentially harm a lot of people, besides Mr. Newsom. Anyway, so this isn't the first time that California faced an overheated grid. So, and if many of you might recall, in 2020, we did have some rolling blackouts in response to extreme heat. But we've learned and applied some of these lessons. And as the effects of climate change intensify, we will continue to face risks to our electrical grid and also to other infrastructure. And we will likely endure blackouts. We will endure road closures, backups in the ports in the future, and extreme weather events. So, how will we build resilience so that we can adapt to these changes and build sustainable and thriving communities? And so, I'd like to offer us a three-pronged approach. One is having a plan and some clear objectives, the way we did in response to this heat wave. And the second key point of my approach is to have an understanding of the facts, have an understanding of the science underlying the changes that we've triggered in our environment, and also understanding the impacts of our plant. And then the third point, which I think is actually the most important point here, is taking a collective and community approach to our response to climate change. We can't do resilience alone. And I want to focus on that a little bit. I'm a pro market economist, and I recognize, like maybe some of the people in Texas, that a well behaving market does a great job of making sure that people get what they want and what they need with minimal waste. That's what we call efficiency. Um, and by well behaving markets, I mean markets that have no market power, where there's complete information, there are no externalities. In other words, markets where individual incentives are aligned with society's needs. However, I also recognize the limitations of markets. When markets are not well behaving, markets actually encourage fragility and rather than resilience. So, when we're addressing both the mitigation of climate change and adaptation of climate change, markets are far, far from well behaving. And with respect to adaptation of climate change, which is the focus of my story, is that markets will produce too little adaptation because individual incentives are misaligned with the needs of society as a whole. So, to build resilience, to be able to adapt, for communities to adapt to climate change, we will need not only to take a collective action through government policy, but also in our local communities. And I think Elena's story about her conversation with this mom in Texas is what I'm talking about, is talking to each other and talking to our local communities. And local communities need to work together to figure out. They need to collaborate rather than compete to figure out what is the best adaptation strategy for them and for their children and for our future generations. And every community is going to have different needs, different perspectives, different ways of looking at the world, and they're going to have different constraints. And I think where we as voters, as members of this society, we need to encourage our governments to take an active role in assuring that these local communities have a voice at the table, that we're having those conversations so that we can be more resilient and not encourage a fragile system that does not allow us to adapt to the realities of climate change. Thank you.
Technical difficulties. Thank you very much, Dr. Gigi Moreno. That was really lovely. And thank you for coming out of your comfort zone. I think that is resilience in and of itself. Appreciate your story, especially about the grid. Some questions for you at the end of during our roundtable. Next up, I have Olivia Canny. And I think I'm mispronouncing your surname. So Olivia, please pronounce your surname for me.
It's Knee, but that was a great attempt. So
Thank you. Welcome, and we look forward to your
thank you.
story.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks so much, Gigi. Like, I'm going to be echoing a lot of your sentiments. So I thought I'd just talk a bit about what I'm doing now and how I got there. So I'm currently a Master of Public Health candidate at Yale University, and I'm studying health policy. And the way that I met Elena and many of the other panelists here today were through the Yale School of Public Health Climate Change and Health Certificate. So around the start of the pandemic, I really found myself consuming a lot of news media about, well, the pandemic, but also climate change. And there were a lot of concerns about how the current pandemic and future pandemics could have been driven by many of the factors that drive climate change. And, it was really concerning. So that was what led me to take this course, and why I was more interested in learning about the links between climate and health. And my two major takeaways from that certificate course were that, yes, they are inextricably linked. And unfortunately, the communities and the people that are the most affected by climate change and other health concerns tend to be those that are the least prepared, and the least able to prepare, whether that's because of their income levels or their geographic location. There's a whole host of factors. So that experience and some other things led me to apply to the Master of Public Health program. And so I'm currently in my final year of that, and I am working on a whole host of public health related issues with regards to health policy. But really what I've come to realize is that climate change is, as Gigi said, it requires a structural response, because so many of the issues that lead to climate change are structural, and it's not going to be an individual that solves them. It has to be a wider response. So with that, I just wanted to share a quick story about the importance of communicating with a given community and taking their input when developing solutions. So this example is not actually climate related, but I work with a group in Canada on health data, and we have a public advisory committee. It's made up of very diverse individuals from across the country, and they all represent different viewpoints. And perhaps most importantly, none of them are experts in health data. So when we have something that has been worked on and looked at by scientists and others who live, breathe, sleep, eat health data, it's easy to get lost in the weeds and not actually see what an obvious problem might be. So we often give projects to this public advisory committee, and the feedback that they give us is just invaluable. For example, one of the recent projects was a grid, and it was just showing all the data holdings that we have access to in Canada. And it's very simple. It's just, it says, oh, we have like data about the environment. We have data about hospitalizations, that kind of thing. And then one key piece of feedback that we got was that it wasn't visually accessible. So we had different colors going on, and, to someone with a normal level of vision, it was readable and easy to read. But one of our members who had visual impairments was able to tell us that actually the most accessible form of this grid would be in black and white and using shading as opposed to using like many different colors. And so that was something that we never would have realized if we hadn't had this input from someone who was not an expert in the subject we were dealing with data, but they were an expert in a different subject. So I just wanted to relate that to the climate change discussion and the resilience discussion, in that it's really important to take into account all the differences we have and the differences that bring that wealth of experience, and how that can all contribute to developing interventions and solutions for climate change. And any sound policy, whether it's strictly health or if it's related more to climate change, really requires that input from the stakeholders and the community itself, because they know what they need the most. So, yes.
Well, thank you so much, Olivia. I agree with your story immensely, and I look forward to chatting with you in the roundtable at the end. We next have up Molly Cohen.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Molly.
Hi. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. I'm so honored to be on a panel with such amazing, intelligent women. I do want to echo what Gigi said at the beginning. I was a little nervous when approached with this panel idea, with seeing the lineup of all the qualified, diligent, and impactful women. And as a 17-year-old, a senior in high school, just entering the climate fight myself, I think it's really easy to feel polarized. And I'm sure many of the women on this lineup have had that experience. But I think the question is why? Like, why do I feel like I don't belong in this conversation just because I'm young? And I think that really speaks to the theme of this panel, the power of resilience, of taking up space that maybe wasn't originally meant for us, and telling our stories, entering these spaces with power and volume and passion. And so I think today I want to tell my STEM climate justice story and a couple of the moments along the way that have brought me here. So as a 17-year-old in high school, I, alongside my peers, have spent most of our young life with a climate crisis clock above our heads. And I think the idea of climate change anxiety is super real for young people, especially in my generation as a member of Gen Z. And it's something that you have to learn to live with. And the only way that it doesn't eat you alive is if you use it to light your fire and light your passion. With that in mind, the first time that I attended a climate protest was freshman year. I was 14, and I left class early to attend with my friends. We took the metro down to downtown LA, and we walked, we chanted, and we stood hand in hand with powerful women who were all here rallying to make our world livable, affordable, and greener for all. And I think something that stood out about that moment, especially to me, was the fact that we did have to leave school early. And a conversation my friends and I were having when we were on the train heading to downtown LA was the fact that we are leaving our education. We're sacrificing the classes we're missing because a lot of the adult lawmakers who have been in office for more time than I have been on this earth have failed to act. And in that moment, when I was chanting, especially with my friend Maddie, she really wanted to lead a chant. She called out, we are what democracy looks like. And to my surprise, voices echoed throughout the entire street in Pershing Square in downtown LA. We are what democracy looks like. And I think in that moment, I felt the passion, the frustration, the anger, and more importantly, the urgency in the air. And I knew that this was a fight that I wanted to be a part of. That leads me to my next point about intergenerational organizing. As a young person, talking with those who have different identities, different backgrounds, and most importantly, span across all ages is the key to solving the climate crisis. I remember I was canvassing in my neighborhood for Sunrise Movement, which is an amazing climate organization, and a local climate organization in my hometown of Pacific Palisades called Resilient Palisades. And we were going door to door, and I was talking with people double, triple, and even quadruple my age. And I think that just goes to show that no matter, again, like I said, your identity and your background and the jobs you pursue and what you're passionate about, a common theme that bridges us together is solving the climate crisis. Because we can't win this fight alone, and it's essential for all of us to get involved. And I think that led me to trying to acknowledge and appreciate the power of youth voices. So, like I mentioned, this is not something that I should be having to fight for or should be having to deal with, but the fact is that I am. And we're all here, and all the women on this panel are here fighting the climate crisis and trying to use our voices for good. And I grew up in an intergenerational household with strong and resilient women who taught me that my most important power is my voice. And waking up and using my voice for change every day. And calling out my opinions, my perspectives, and my passions from the rooftops. And it's frustrating, like I mentioned, to see all these prominent lawmakers fail to act. I've been to DC, and I, alongside my friends, have protested on Capitol Hill. We have waited outside Senate office buildings. And again, I think maybe even more important aspect of that is getting into our neighborhood. And this led me to how I met the wonderful moderator, Elena, with a program, a youth group called Gen Z for Darling. And I realized that thinking about the climate crisis on a global scale was exhausting and frankly, really, really scary. And burnout and activist burnout, climate burnout is super real when you're constantly surrounding yourself with all this negative information from the media, from your friends, and from the people around you. So I started to get more involved with local politics and with the help of the wonderful Elena, like I mentioned. And we began mobilizing a campaign to elect a candidate for city council that we believed would help tackle the climate crisis on a local scale. And a key part of understanding the climate crisis and solving it is addressing it in our own backyard. And getting involved with the local city council and local initiatives is the key. And it's also thinking about the ways as I grow up and I will soon enter adulthood, not too soon, but pretty soon, thinking about the intersections of so many other things and the climate crisis, transportation and housing, even transportation alone making up 41% of our state's greenhouse gas emissions. And how that happens is we have low density, single-use zoning heavily seen in LA. And that is something that we can address and we can solve on a local and state level. So as an adult, or when I become an adult, these are issues that I want to mobilize around, and I think the work I'm doing now on a local scale will help me eventually get there. And it is so inspiring to be a part of a local grassroots green effort in my own community and going door to door and having dialogue with my neighbors, my friends, my teachers, understanding that thinking about the climate crisis on a global scale, however important that may be, it's also equally important to talk about, like I mentioned, the climate crisis in our own backyard. And finally, I just want to acknowledge that how much reading and immersing myself in other opinions have helped grip me in the resources that I need to fight the climate crisis. And more specifically, I just wanted to give a shout out to this book because I think reading authors outside your own community gives you an incredibly crucial perspective. So this is called The Intersectional Environmentalist by Leah Thomas, and acknowledging the knowledge that Black, Indigenous, and other POC women have bestowed on us, often without credit, is incredibly important when we move forward in conversations about STEM and STEAM and tackling the climate crisis. And if you're going to add a climate book to your reading list this year, I highly recommend this one, again, The Intersectional Environmentalist. And all of this is to say that I, again, am incredibly inspired to be here with all of you, to be here on this amazing lineup of panelists. And I hope that through this panel and through other movements and through listening to other stories, that I keep harnessing my voice, and it shows everyone on this panel and all the women here again today that our voice truly is our most powerful. So thank you so much for having me. And amazing to be here.
Thank you so much, Molly. Such a pleasure hearing your story and your voice. It's so needed. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Jasmine Gonlin. And I don't think I'm pronouncing your last name either correctly. So I don't know. Please help me there. But nice to see you, Jasmine. I am?
Hi. It's Jasmine Gonlin. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm actually wearing my a little romper that I got through a clothing swap. We love that circular economy. So I just am, like Molly, so humbled to be here. When Elena initially asked me to serve on this panel with fellow women in STEM and STEAM, I was like, why? Because my background is in marketing and my background is in my professional background is in higher education. So today, my story is actually about me publishing my website, which has officially been live for a year now. So I have been vegan for a little over 5 years now, and my intention for that started with my health and then moved into making decisions that felt best for my community's health and then to the health of the planet. And as I find myself making decisions that are best for my health, it trickles out in that way. And that's really how I started to get involved with climate. I barely want to say science because I am not a climate scientist, but we can't all be climate scientists because who would design the posters, like Olivia said, and who would communicate this information? So publishing my website was a really big feat for me. Last year, I knew that I wanted to make a bigger difference within the climate space. And like Molly said, I was experiencing intense climate anxiety. Where I was living at the time did not have any sunrise movements. They didn't have a lot of structural support for me to get involved in the climate movement. So I had to kind of find and navigate my way there. As I said, I was working in higher education, so there were a lot of community members who supported research and education, but I was also living in a state that was highly intoxicated by the coal industry. So I did get involved in community organizations that were working on everything from creating policymaker guides to translating science to community members and creating that community resilience, because we have a lot of FEMA flood zones where I was living, and we experienced 100-year floods multiple times within a 5-year span. So that was helpful for me. Taking direct action helped to quell my climate anxiety, but I also found myself recognizing that there was a limit of what I could do within my community. And within that, I started to talk a lot to my friends and family, and I recognized that I was kind of getting on their nerves, so I just started to write it out. And that's how my blogging started. So it takes me a very long time to write blogs because there's a lot of emotion that goes into it. But I started my website just by putting out blogs that felt emotionally would resonate with me and people who also felt alienated and isolated within the spaces that they were living or the spaces that they were working. But I also wanted to make sure that this wasn't just about how I felt. So every single time that I would go into publish something, I made sure that there was climate science behind it. I also made sure that I had my information correct. So I enrolled in the Yale Climate Change and Health program. I also took 2 other climate change certificates over the past year as well with different programs. And taking this action both within my community as well as personally so I could continue my education helped me a lot and empowered me as well as built up my resilience. So for me, resilience is kind of the base point, but I want to go even further than that. So once we have that resilience, how can we go further? And I quit my job, moved across the country, and completely changed careers because this is so important to me. And I feel so passionate about creating a livable future for all of us. So again, I'm so incredibly humbled to be here on this panel. I could probably talk forever about the things that I have changed and would like to change going forward. But really, I would say probably in terms of the takeaways is the more that we empower ourselves individually, the more that we empower our community, right? So don't feel bad if you're not doing everything because you just can't. You can't do everything. Like, I sold my car and I bike now, which is amazing, but I couldn't have done that where I lived before. And I had a lot of guilt with that. So don't feel bad if you're not doing everything, but you got to do something. We got to do something. The other thing is, don't think that you don't know enough. Like, me being asked to be on this panel was super, super humbling. Me being in the space of the folks who were in the Yale Climate Change and Health program was super humbling for me, because I still don't feel like I have a science background, and I still don't feel qualified to communicate anything about clients or climate scientists or climate, excuse me, I'm getting a little bit nervous. But no matter what, it's enough to tell your story. And then the other thing that I will just leave everyone with is to make sure that we fully feel our feelings. As Molly said, this is something that every single person who gets born behind us has to deal with. And there's a lot of emotions with that. And what's been missing with the numbers, especially for folks who are less data oriented, is the emotion behind that. Once we feel that, oh, we're losing pieces of our home, then we can fully move forward. And that's how we build resilience. So we have to be honest with that. Thank you so much for having me here. And I will pass it to the next speaker.
Thank you, Jasmine. You were fantastic. Look forward to chatting at the end of this. And I'm hearing a lot of imposter syndrome. So maybe that's something someone wants to discuss about, or we can talk at the roundtable. But I think everyone is doing a wonderful job, and your voices are needed in this space, regardless if you're a scientist or not. Next up, we have another Yale grad, that is Saskia Hosletter-Lippy, and I don't think I've seen your whole name fully, so please, if I'm butchering it, please do tell me. And pleasure to see you. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning. I am speaking to you from Portland, Oregon. As Elena said, I'm a classmate of hers from the Yale Climate Change and Public Health Certificate Program. I'm by training a psychiatrist. I'm a third-generation physician. And I'm an activist in what is termed the movement of all movements, which is coined by longtime nonviolent activist Dr. George Lakey. But I don't want to talk about Dr. Saskia today. I want to tell you the story about how I became Rocky. And Rocky is the activist name that was given to me in November of 2020, after the first time I was stalked for my activism. And I want to dedicate this story to the Doomers, who are a group of activists I've been working with in mental health mutual aid. This is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And these activists have helped me understand that they have no hope for their future. And they've really given themselves over to a kind of nihilism that's quite dangerous to their health and the health of our society. Rocky is a wounded healer. The name is a nod to both the warrior in me, but also to the rocks that I gave out in the uprisings of 2020 here in Portland. And Passionistas, I want to ask you today the same question that I asked the protesters that would come into our respite station, which is, which do you need more? Do you need love? In which case I'll give you rose quartz, or do you need protection? In which case I'll give you obsidian. Rocky works on intuition, not logic. And she's a scientist and an activist of a different type. I'm in the field of translational research, translational science. This is a new multidisciplinary field. It's being looked at in biomedical science. It's being looked at in public health. And what I've really been doing in the last couple of years is pioneering the application of psychological first aid, which is a disaster technique, into the field. So I've done that in protest situations. I've done that in collective grief circles. I'm partnering with artists. I'm partnering with nonprofits. And it's a trauma-informed, evidence-based methodology, which takes as its premise that trauma, we, as humans, we are naturally resilient to trauma. And as you know from climate change, trauma is going to be more and more part of our daily life as the planet warms. So it's also a climate change adaptation that I've made in my own career. But I want to go back a little bit to how Rocky originated. And that is when I was a little girl, I didn't understand why the world was the way it was. And I used to give away my allowance to charitable causes. And I donated books to prisons. I sent money to a girl my age in Africa and bought her textbooks and her shoes for years. I was once caught by my parents calling in to Jimmy Swaggart. They stopped me from giving him money, but I would have done that too. And then fast forward to age 21, when I had a very profound and disabling depression, which I would call existential crisis. And out of that crisis came my path forward to psychiatry. I planted a seed in that black hole, and I promised myself that one day I would help other people escape the black hole. And I did that very successfully until 2019, when through a series of personal tragedies, the life that I had so carefully constructed as a physician really began to fall apart. And Rocky is the outgrowth of that post-traumatic growth. And here's two things I want to tell you about that were key in that transformation. The first is, we know from the research from Roshi Joan Halifax, who studies toxic stress, is that the difference between toxic stress and stress is simply this: it's pausing. So I used my own spiritual practice starting in 2016 and beyond to transform my own suffering into altruism. And what I really recommend to all of you is that you try to take 15 minutes every day for what I call resilience practice. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you sing, if you dance, if you journal, if you meditate, if you draw, if you dig in the dirt, but devote those 15 minutes to resilience. And that will transform any kind of toxic stress into stress. And that has a profound effect on your body. The other thing that was key to the transformation to Rocky was that I uncoupled myself from the silo that this world has put us in. Our science, as you know, is siloed into fields. And what needs to happen for us to move science forward in this next phase that we're going into in climate change is that we need to unshackle that, and we need to start blending our fields together. That's why I signed up for the Climate Change Certificate in Public Health. It's why I started studying the humanitarian crisis that we're in here in Portland at a societal level. And in the past 3 years, I've successfully left my field of psychiatry. I'm now in the field of peace building, in democracy activism, in violence prevention. I work in the fight for human rights, for women's rights, for for houseless advocacy, for trans rights, immigrants' rights, carceral justice, social justice. What unites all of these movements is nonviolent resistance. That's how we win, Passionistas. And I also made my own systemic life change. I left the suburbs and I executed my own one-person rebellion. I cut my carbon footprint by 70%. I walked to work. My kids walked to school, and I invested in living in our city's wounded core. I also decided to devote 50% of my time to activism pro bono. Passionistas, I want to tell you today, Mother Earth is calling for all of us to innovate. We need to use our lives, our networks, our work, our hearts for systemic change. The status quo will kill the seventh generation. And to the doomers, I really want you to know I am fighting with you and for you. I love each and every one of you, and I want every soul on this fight for University Earth. Stay with us, resist, dissent. It will do your soul good. Thank you. It's an honor.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you, Saskia. That was really, really quite touching and quite moving. I am impressed by all of these women. Next up, we have, I believe it's our last speaker, Julie Wedge.
Hey, good morning,
Hi,
everyone.
lovely. Hi, good morning.
And thank you for agreeing to stay on here with me. I feel a little bit better when I actually can see a person that is, physically on the screen. My name is Julie Wedge. I am a political consultant. I'm self-employed, have been for years and years and years. I too will be honest, when Elena asked me to be on this panel, was not sure exactly how I was a woman in STEM. but slowly have discovered that that political science is a somewhat of a science. I mean, maybe a softer science, but we'll call it a science anyway. And I think that what the most important thing for me to express is a couple of things. First of all, as you've heard from all of the women prior to me, policy does not exist in a vacuum. So while we talk about climate change is structurally the problem, right? So everything relates to, right? We can relate public health to what's happening with the climate. We can relate transportation, education, housing. All of it relates to how we relate to climate and global climate change. Are we building transit-oriented development? Are we taking into consideration, how we reduce our own carbon footprint? But I also want to caution, because the power of resilience, you can get easily overwhelmed by the climate and the crisis and seeing what happens. I mean, I happen to live in California. I'm just outside of Sacramento, so I'm, sort of immersed in the fires and the smoke from the fires and, and all of those things. And I know that it becomes a situation in which you want to be, and you do get fearful and anxious and all of those things. Resilience is about understanding that you are not alone. And resilience is about understanding that you can do what you can do, but it is also critically important to understand the difference between individual changes and capitalism changes, corporate changes. Corporations have a responsibility and a duty. And if they want to be considered people, as Citizens United decided that they were, then they have a personal responsibility to this as well. Working in the political realm, all politics is local. So I was really pleased to hear Molly talking about how, when she felt the overwhelm of everything that was happening, it was because she was looking at this from a global and even more specifically a national level. When she turned her focus to all politics is local, she found that is a specific place in which individuals can make large impact. So as a person that consults for your elected officials on a variety of public policy matters, climate change being one of them, I am completely reliant upon community to tell me how the impact is affecting them. But it is also my duty to talk to the experts, to recognize it's not, yes, I have imposter syndrome just like every other woman that is in a position to have imposter syndrome. So I do have that. But it isn't about imposter syndrome and feeling inferior. It's about a particular expertise. And scientists in climate change have particular expertise that has to be weighed differently than, right? It doesn't mean that it's weighed more than, it just means that it's weighed differently than. And so in the weighing of differently than, we know that the scientists are saying the world is burning. We know that this isn't a joke. We see the ice shelves and that still seems far away. But when we bring that closer to home, we have to listen to those scientists from that broad perspective and then bring it to a at home, how can we change some things here kind of perspective. And there's also the truth that science is looking at the science and not necessarily looking at the impact. And we need both of those things, right? So as somebody who's in the middle, who's trying to create public policy that both listens to the science, respects the science, hears what the scientists are saying, and is able to make a piece of public policy that directly mitigates that impact for community is where I live. So in saying that, my story is going to go back a few years when I was working for an environmental organization in Nevada that was working on the mercury regulatory process for the state. Had to listen to the scientists, had to know that at the time, Nevada's mining industry in Eastern Nevada was emitting 90% of the airborne mercury west of Texas. So I guess we're all just going to pick on Texas a little bit. But I mean, in this case, I'm not picking on Texas, I'm picking on Nevada. So we knew that that's just the science. That's the reality of some things, right? We knew that industry was responsible for that, right? It's clear, right? Smokestacks are happening, digging into the mining is a huge environmental impact. Have to work with governmental agencies, have to work with community, but also have to work with industry. So going back to what Elena said and what Gigi said, and really what all of the women on this panel have said, is that we can't hold ourselves to a particular standard. We can't push people out of the movement because they are talking to industry, or because they are working with industry, or because they are doing these things, because they have to be at the table. We cannot personal responsibility our way out of climate change. It's I mean, if we could, then Gigi's conversation about how California took personal responsibility and avoided rolling blackouts, we'd have solved the climate crisis decades ago if we could personal responsibility our way out of this. We have to talk to those corporations. We have to talk to those big polluters. We have to do those kinds of major changes. And so the second piece of the story let me finish the first piece of the story. We did, in fact, after a long, arduous process of bringing in community, bringing in elected leaders, bringing in the governor's office, and ultimately bringing in industry. And we fought it out, and there were successes, there were failures. We won, we lost. And in the end, we ended up having to bring it to the entirety of the legislature, because community, industry, and electeds couldn't get it done without legislation. So those types of things are where we need to focus our efforts, right? If you want to yell at somebody, definitely yell at your elected officials, but do it in a way that brings, something to the table, saying that this is directly how this impacts me. This is what I'm experiencing in the midst of all of this. And we have to think about this. We have to think about global climate change from an intersectional perspective, especially as it deals with public health. We know that asthma rates are going to increase if our climate is full of wildfire smoke. I mean, these are things that we just know. I'm lucky and fortunate enough right now to work for a woman who, in Oakland, is working with the port, and is working with industry, and is working with all kinds of community and scientific leaders. She's a scientist herself, graduate from MIT, with a master's degree from Tufts in urban and environmental policy. One of the things that she just brought forward that is really game changing, and this is where I'm going to bring in Jasmine and the marketing, and the reason that this is important is because we have been screaming about this for a few years now. She's been working with Hyundai, and she's actually brought hydrogen fuel trucks to the Port of Oakland. While we are still fighting the conversation about a particular highway that goes through a historically marginalized area, to make those types of what most people would consider small changes is going to be incredibly enormous. The fight right now in the Bay Area is whether we put trucks on 580 or we don't put trucks on 580. And I'm going to tell you, the fight is between wealthy white people and those who are historically marginalized. So how do we create a public policy? How do we create a roadmap in which everybody feels like my road matters and the people on my road matter? And I think that one of the ways that you do it is you think outside of the box around different fuel sources for industry, right? Industry doesn't have to. Industry has enough money to structure themselves differently, far more easily and quickly than individuals do. It's difficult to pick up your life and move somewhere where you can reduce your carbon footprint, as Saskia just pointed out, right? As Jasmine pointed out, it's difficult as an individual to make those changes. It's really easy for industry to make simple fixes. One of the ways that we fixed the mercury regulatory issue in Nevada, we just asked mining to put filters on their smokestacks. $2 million. I don't have $2 million. I'm sure Elena doesn't have $2 million. I think most people on this panel don't just have $2 million to drop on a filter. But you know who does? The mining industry. And asking them to do something simple like that isn't and shouldn't be hard. Those doors should be open. They should be accessible. So find your local me, whoever that is in your area, and sit down and talk with us and tell us what it is that you want to do and how you want to get connected. And most of us actually know, I'm going to start this sentence by saying the system is broken. Doesn't matter which system we're talking about. Political system, environmental system, governmental system, all of the systems are broken. The incarceration system, it's all broken. And so the only thing that we can do, and the power of resilience for us, is that the only thing that we can do is fix it. So we have to get together. We have to have these conversations. We have to have this communication. We have to think outside of the box. I was talking to a friend just recently, and he was saying to me, well, it's capitalism and we're just going to have to figure it out. And I thought, how hilarious. It's the divine right of kings, and we're just going to have to figure it out. And so we think that these systems can't be, they're so huge and they're so overwhelming. But even small things like converting trucks to hydrogen fuel makes a difference. In my own house, in my own life, our air conditioning went out. Had a choice. Do I replace it with another air conditioning that has natural gas and those kinds of issues? Or do I replace with a heat pump and it's electric and I can run this with my solar panels and things like that? That's an individual choice that I made to go with a heat pump. But is that going to fix the climate crisis? No. But if we do things like put filters on smokestacks or switch over to hydrogen fuel trucks, those types of things will make very, very, very large impacts in the grand scheme of things. And I also want to echo what Molly was saying about the generational connection. This isn't about a generational divide anymore. We have to put that down. I know that this has been laid on us, and as somebody who's Gen X, and we always consider ourselves the middle child, and apparently we ate Gen Y. Because it didn't just go boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. There was a whole Gen Y, and apparently we ate them. So sorry, any Gen Yers out there that, but we are glad to have you. As Gen X, we were a tiny little generation, so we're doing two big ones. So welcome aboard. I'm happy to be XY. It works for me. It's all good. But I say that to point out the absurdity of what we discuss as a generational divide. This isn't a generational divide. This is a cultural divide. This is a rugged individualist divide. This is a mentality shift that we need to make, right? Again, I'm going to go back to, we cannot rugged individualist our way out of climate change. We are going to have to collectively make decisions. We are going to have to come together. We are going to have these conversations, and we are going to have to expect our elected officials to not just blow this off. And yes, that means that we have to be there all the time. And yes, it means that we have to spend our time and our energy and our treasure in doing this work. And now I'm going to pause, and I'm going to say, in the midst of all of this, know that you are not alone. Know that you do have a community. And when you are feeling that significant pressure that the world is going to end and the boomers are going to take the earth with them and capitalism is going to destroy us all, and when the weight of the world is crushing down on you, know that you can step away for a minute and do what Saskia was saying. Take a walk. Look at the things in your neighborhood. Find things that, I know it sounds simple because, again, you can't self your way out of any of this, but you're also not clear, not making good decisions, and expending too much of your personal time and treasure if you're exhausted. The movement needs you healthy. The movement needs you whole. The movement needs you at the top of your game. And sometimes the best way to do that is to step away from it a day, a week, figure it out, whatever it takes, dance it out, sing it out, walk it out, smell the flowers, whatever it is that you need to do so that you can be whole in the movement. And so I am going to leave you all with policy doesn't exist in a vacuum. please work with us. Please don't stay in your silos. Please come forward and talk to us. Your elected officials are elected to represent you. They are called representatives in a democracy for a reason, right? It's because we're not supposed to have to carry all of this. We're supposed to be able to trust that our elected officials are doing these things, are checking these boxes, are talking to the scientists, are talking to community, and are coming up with the best possible thing that we can do. And I'm also going to say this. Please don't ever think that policy is one and done. There are things called amendments. Make sure you utilize those too. If the policy that passed isn't strong enough, make it better. Don't spend your time, as some have done over years and years and years, chipping away at things little by little and taking those things away. Don't allow that to happen. Do your own chipping away. Learn from that and chip away in the positive. Add things to these pieces of legislation, because I'm going to tell you guys a little secret. It's easier to kill a bill than it is to pass one. And it is so easy to amend it once it's passed, because the big hoopla, the big resistance and support all happens with the passing of the bill. Once the bill is passed, you can say things like, there was an unintended consequence here and we need to shove this amendment in to make this better. So just know that there are those of us that are hearing you. We feel this. We probably feel an extra sense of guilt because we're clearly on the side of evil. But I do want to say, get out of your generational silos, get out of your personal silos. Feel the sense of urgency. As somebody who's 52 years old, I tell people all the time, I have more life behind me than ahead of me. And so that fierce urgency of now becomes a very real thing for a lot of us. But let's let that be an age thing. Let's let that be there is a fierce urgency of now thing. And so, Elena, thank you so much for connecting all of us together. I feel like I have a new resource of people that I can tap into for the things that we're doing legislatively here in California. And I want to thank everyone for allowing us to share our stories.
Thank you, Julie. I'm so impressed. I think thank you for your beautiful story, Julie, and importance. We're at 11:02, I believe. We have until 11:15. So I wanted to ask, I really want to give space to other folks, but is there anything that folks want to leave with that they've heard from other panelists, or that they feel, I don't want to be Pollyannish about this, but maybe something positive or something hopeful. And if not, that's completely fine. If folks have anything that's they'd like to speak on.
I'm just going to say, I love this panel of women. Like, let's look at how amazing we all are right now. And for the amazing people that are listening to all of us yammer about this kind of stuff, you're all amazing too.
I mean, I think just the fact that we're on this panel and we have such a diverse group of people and different skills, I think it brings us hope, and that we're all working on it in different areas, and so I think there is hope. I think it's real. The hope is real.
It's really the beauty of technology. Like, let's bring the T into STEM here. It's really the beauty of technology. In no meaningful way would we have ever been able to pull something like this together 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, pandemic was horrible, but look at the amazing stuff that has connected so many different people from so many diverse backgrounds I'm looking forward to working with all of you moving forward.
Jasmine, do you have anything to say? Or Molly? I'm going to ask you two. I'm just going to mute myself for a second.
I think maybe just one last thing to add that I definitely... Can you guys hear me? I think my audio was muffled before. So sorry. I think one last thing to add that was just a reflection of everyone being here is that a reminder to take up space and use your voice. And it's so often where we all feel polarized and we feel like we're not meant to be here because we don't have the right set of skills or we don't know enough or we just often find ourselves comparing ourselves to other people. And I think what I tried to tackle, but honestly, I'd say is my biggest takeaway just from hearing other people is that we are meant to be at the conversations that weren't meant for us and pulling up a seat at the table and basically demanding that our voices be heard. Because if this panel is any representation, we all have a unique story that relates to STEM and STEAM, that relates to the climate crisis, public health, and all of those really important intersections of how we live. And we just all deserve to share our stories. And I feel like that's one of my biggest takeaways from listening to the amazing women that I'm staring at right now.
Let's get our girl Shirley Chisholm a shout out. Grab that seat at then pull. If you don't have a chair at the, or if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a chair, right?
Indeed. Yes. Sorry, for any other ladies or women, Jasmine, Olivia, or Saskia, would you, Jasmine, I see.
I'll just want to share this quote from Oprah, which I think kind of resonates with what we're all doing. Wherever you are, that is your platform, your stage, your circle of influence. That is your talk show, and that is where your power lies. So wherever we are, whether it's in a physical space or digitally, this is where our power is. And it's so, like Gigi said, I'm very hopeful to see all of you and to recognize that even though we all have very different educational backgrounds and different personal backgrounds, that we're all working towards a similar goal.
And I'm going to just say, I need every one of you. Jasmine, I need your marketing expertise. Saskia and Gigi and Olivia, I need your policy and your science expertise. Molly, I need your energy and your activism. Elena, I need your brilliance just in general, right? Like I can look at this panel of amazing women and like I want to grab all of the knowledge from all of you. So thank you all.
That was such a lovely quote, Jasmine, too, that I think to end, I think we could talk for a while. I know that. I think it's, I wanted to thank you all. I want to thank Saskia for your story, Rocky. That was really beautiful and impactful. And how, if I may ask, how are you feeling now? I mean, that was a great story to share, and I think that story needs to be heard quite a lot. I think it resonated with all of us. But yes, thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Elena, for the invitation, and to Amy and Nancy for hosting this. I mean, one of the things that Rocky has learned the hard way is that activism is can be dangerous for women. And you know, I've been called crazy. I've been called an extremist. I've been, you know, and I'm not alone in that. I'm in very good company. When you go up against the status quo doesn't always like that. And so this is actually my first time speaking publicly about it. So it's a big day for me. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, wow. I'm very honored, Saskia. Thank you. And I have to say thank you, Olivia, for speaking as well, and now doing your master's at Yale after continuing on class, which is amazing. Do you have anything to say, Olivia?
Yeah, one of the things that just really struck me was how we all had such like similar threads to our stories, although we obviously experienced things separately, and just we didn't practice all together, but I feel like we really flowed well into like each one of our own stories, like they all kind of connected. So I guess that's a testament to you, Elena, for putting together a great panel.
No, I thank you. And Gigi, thank you for getting out of your comfort zone to speak. And, you know, that's, and thank you for talking about resilience. Do you have anything, last comments or remarks?
Yeah, I know that when we started this talking about this panel was about STEM, and not all of us are in the STEM field, but I just wanted to remind us both on this panel and in our audience that you don't have to be a scientist to have a role in making a difference for climate change. And I think we're at a stage now where communication and education about climate change and about what we can do is really important. I think to some extent, the scientific community has not done a really good job marketing. The fact that there's so many people in the United States in particular that don't believe in climate change as if it's something, of faith, right? And so I think we're at a stage where we're going to make the biggest difference when we can do the appropriate marketing or communication about climate change and about what our best response is for all communities.
Uh, Thank you, Gigi. I agree. I agree. It is, I'm looking at the time, being mindful. It's 11:11, and I just want to say that I'm going to give a shout out to Julie, Molly, Jasmine, Olivia, Gigi, and Saskia. You're all amazing, and thank you so much. I think the power of resilience is also us coming together from different backgrounds and being able to support us. And I've gone through a lot of changes. I've been away for a bit, and I also am on my university board, which has been amazing. And I've had meetings this week, so I'm excited to change things there. And a lot of you have been part of that journey, and so I'm very honored and thank you for your support. And Amy and Nancy, I'm sure we'll be again on a different topic, but thank you all for today. And for folks, if you want to follow, I believe Amy and Nancy have our links posted, and to reach out to any of us. And I just think the importance of taking up space in our fields, in our lives, and speaking our truths, and even if our voice shakes a bit, it's still, that's the most important thing. So I'm hopeful after this call, and my cup is full, as they say. So I'm very honored to be with all of you. So thank you so much. And unless anyone else has a closing remark, I want to say I'm deeply honored, touched, and loved by all of you. So thank you.